The CEO looked at my hand and forgot how to breathe. The room went quiet in that clean, expensive way corporate rooms do. No one moved. No one laughed. The woman from legal stopped turning pages. The junior analyst lowered his pen. Even the wall clock seemed to soften its ticking. The CEO sat across from me, silver-haired, careful, the kind of man who made people lean forward before he finished a sentence. But now he was staring at my grandmother's ring. Not at me. At the ring. His face changed so slowly that I almost missed it. First confusion. Then recognition. Then something I had seen only once before when a nurse told my mother there was nothing more they could do. Loss. He reached one hand toward the table, then stopped himself. His voice came out low. "Where did you get that ring?" I looked down. The gold band was worn thin at the edges. The small green stone had a scratch across it. I had almost left it in a drawer that morning. I said it belonged to my grandmother. The CEO did not blink. Then he whispered the words that split my life in two. I thought it was gone, 30 years ago. 3 weeks earlier, my grandmother died on a Tuesday morning. Not dramatically. Not surrounded by family. Not with a room full of people holding hands and telling stories about what she meant to them. She died in a narrow hospital bed outside Cleveland with a beige blanket pulled to her chest and a plastic cup of ice water she had not touched. I was there because the nursing home called me first. Not because I was closest. Because I was the only number that still worked. Her name was Evelyn Harper, though most people in our family called her Evie when they wanted something from her. I called her Grandma. She had lived in the same small ranch house for 42 years. Pale yellow siding, 2 steps up to the porch, a lilac bush by the mailbox that bloomed even when nobody trimmed it. She kept her bills in envelopes by month. She saved grocery receipts with paper clips. She wrote birthdays on a kitchen calendar even for people who had not called her in years. My mother used to say Grandma preferred being alone. "She's always been that way," Mom would say, rinsing a coffee mug too hard. "Don't take it personally." But loneliness and preference do not always look different from the outside. Sometimes people call it privacy because guilt is heavier. The funeral was held on a gray Friday afternoon at Miller & Sons, a funeral home between a dentist's office and a small insurance agency. There were 12 rows of folding chairs. Only one was used. Mine. The funeral director, a kind man named Paul, kept looking toward the entrance. He had that practiced patience of someone used to disappointment. "We can wait a few more minutes," he said. I checked my phone, though I knew what it would show. Nothing from my mother. Nothing from my Uncle Ray. Nothing from my cousins who posted vacation photos the same morning with captions about family being everything. I set the phone face down in my lap. "No," I said, "we can start." Paul nodded. He did not pity me openly. That made it worse. The service lasted 14 minutes. A short prayer. 2 lines from a hymn. A reading from a folded paper because nobody had submitted memories. When Paul asked if anyone wanted to say a few words, he looked at me gently. I stood because silence felt cruel. But once I reached the small podium, I realized I did not know how to summarize a woman everyone had treated like a background object. I looked at her photograph beside the urn. It was old. Maybe 20 years old. She wore a navy blouse and small pearl earrings. Her smile was careful, like she had learned not to ask too much from a camera. "My grandmother lived quietly," I said. My voice sounded smaller than I expected. She remembered people's birthdays. She made soup when neighbors were sick. She never complained when people forgot her. I stopped. That was not enough. But it was also too much. I looked at the empty chairs. She deserved more than this. Paul lowered his eyes. I sat back down. After the service, he handed me a cardboard box of her personal items from the nursing home. A hairbrush. Reading glasses. A paperback mystery with a receipt as a bookmark. A small bottle of lavender lotion. And a plain white envelope with my name written in her handwriting. Claire. Not sweetie. Not dear. Just my name, steady and careful. I waited until I got to my car before opening it. Inside was a short note. "Claire, you were the one who came. That matters more than you know." In the bottom of the envelope was the ring. I had seen it before, but only on her right hand. She used to turn it with her thumb when my mother raised her voice at Thanksgiving. She touched it when Uncle Ray joked that she was sitting on old lady money. She wore it when she mailed birthday cards that nobody acknowledged. I held it in my palm. It was warmer than it should have been. For a moment I felt embarrassed by my own reaction. It was just a ring. An old ring. Probably worth very little. But grief does strange things to ordinary objects. It gives them weight. I drove to her house the next morning. My mother had not offered to help. She said she had a church volunteer meeting and that sorting through all that stuff would be emotionally exhausting. Uncle Ray texted me once. Let me know if you find any paperwork about accounts. Not photos. Not recipes. Not letters. Accounts. Grandma's house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old wood. The heat had been turned low and every room felt like it was waiting for someone disciplined to return. I started in the kitchen. Her mugs were lined by size. Her canned goods faced forward. There was a dish towel folded over the oven handle embroidered with blue flowers. I found a stack of cards in a drawer. Most were unsent. Birthday cards. Sympathy cards. Congratulations cards. She had written messages in some of them, then never mailed them. Maybe she lost the addresses. Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe she got tired of reaching first. In the bedroom, I found a shoebox under the bed. Inside were pay stubs, church bulletins, a yellowed newspaper clipping, and one photograph turned face down. I picked it up. My grandmother looked young in it, younger than I had ever imagined her. She stood beside a man in a dark suit outside a brick building. She was laughing. Really laughing. Not politely. Not carefully. Her head was tilted back and the man was looking at her like she had just said something that rearranged his world. There was no name on the back. Only a date. May 1994. I sat on the edge of her bed and stared at it. 1994 was 30 years ago. I did not know why that mattered yet. I only knew the photo felt like a door someone had closed too hard. That evening my mother came by for 40 minutes. She walked through the house with her purse still on her shoulder, touching nothing. You should donate most of this, she said. There's no point keeping clutter. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the shoebox in front of me. Did Grandma ever talk about someone from 1994, I asked. My mother looked up too quickly. Someone, a man, maybe from work. She cleaned offices, Claire. There were probably a lot of men in buildings. Her tone had sharpened at the edges. I slid the photograph across the table. She glanced down. Not long, but long enough. Her jaw moved once. Where did you find that? In her room. Well, she said picking up her keys, some things are private for a reason. She kept it for 30 years. My mother looked toward the window. Outside, the lilac bush moved in the wind. She kept a lot of things she should have let go. Then she left. I stayed at the table after her car pulled away. The house settled around me. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the wall an old pipe clicked. I looked at the photograph again. Then at the ring on my finger. It fit better than it had that morning. A few weeks later I wore it to the contract meeting because I needed courage. Not luck. Courage. My company had been negotiating with a regional development group for months. I worked in community housing compliance, which sounded more important than it felt on most days. Mostly I reviewed documents people ignored until money was at risk. The meeting was downtown on the 23rd floor of a building with polished stone floors and security guards who looked through you until your name appeared on a screen. I wore my best navy blazer, the one I bought on clearance after my divorce. I arrived early. Women like me often do. The conference room had a long walnut table and a view of the river cutting through the city. Everyone seemed comfortable with their place in the room. The senior partners took the middle seats. Legal sat near the screen. Assistants lined the edges with laptops open. I chose a chair near the end. Not hidden. Not central. Just safe. When the CEO entered, conversation changed shape. People straightened. Smiles became measured. His name was Daniel Whitmore. I knew him from articles, donor plaques, and the kind of photographs where powerful men hold shovels at groundbreaking ceremonies. He shook hands around the table. When he reached me, his grip was firm and brief. Claire Harper, I said. His eyes moved politely over my face. Good to meet you. Nothing in his expression changed. Not then. The meeting began. Numbers appeared on the screen. Someone discussed zoning deadlines. Someone else used the phrase community partnership 3 times in 1 minute. I took notes. I listened. I turned my grandmother's ring with my thumb. I did not notice I was doing it until the room went silent. Daniel Whitmore had stopped speaking. His sentence hung unfinished over the table. He was staring at my hand. Then his eyes lifted to mine. The distance between us changed. Not physically. Something quieter. Something older. "Where did you get that ring?" he asked. Every person in the room looked at me. For most of my life I had been good at being unnoticed. It was safer that way. But in that moment, wearing my grandmother's ring under fluorescent corporate lights, I felt the strange burden of being seen. I swallowed. It belonged to my grandmother. His face lost color. What was her name? I should have answered quickly. Instead, I looked at the ring. Then at him. Evelyn Harper. Daniel Whitmore closed his eyes for 1 second. Only one. But when he opened them, he was no longer the man from the donor plaques. He was someone standing in front of an old wound. And somehow my grandmother was inside it. He looked at the room, then back at me. His voice dropped. I thought it was gone, 30 years ago. I didn't answer. No one did. The silence stretched just long enough to feel intentional. Daniel Whitmore straightened in his chair. The version of him that ran companies returned first, controlled, measured, public. "We'll take a short break," he said. Chairs shifted, laptops closed halfway. People avoided looking at me too directly, which meant they were looking anyway. He stood. "Claire," he added, not raising his voice, "could you stay a moment?" The others filed out with polite efficiency. The woman from legal gave me a small sympathetic nod. The junior analyst pretended to check his phone while glancing back once. Then the door closed. And the room changed again. Daniel didn't sit right away. He walked to the window, hands loosely clasped behind his back. The river below moved with quiet certainty. "I'm going to ask you something," he said, "and I need you to answer as plainly as you can." I nodded. He turned. "Where did your grandmother get that ring?" His tone wasn't aggressive. It was careful. Like he was stepping onto something that might break under him. "I don't know," I said. "She left it to me." He studied my face, searching for something I didn't know how to give him. "Evelyn Harper," he repeated. "That was her name." "Yes." He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down slowly. I haven't heard that name spoken out loud in a very long time. He looked at the table, not at me. I thought she had gotten rid of it, or lost it. I didn't ask. I didn't interrupt. Silence did more work than questions right now. He let out a breath. "We worked in the same building," he said. "Mid-90s. I was junior then. Not this." He gestured vaguely around the room. "She cleaned offices at night. I stayed late most evenings. We started talking. Small things at first." His mouth lifted slightly, not quite a smile. "She had a way of asking questions that made you answer honestly, not professionally, not strategically, honestly." I felt something tighten in my chest. That didn't match the woman who clipped coupons and avoided conflict at Thanksgiving. She remembered everything, he continued, details, dates, what people said when they thought no one important was listening. He paused. She noticed me. There was a weight in the way he said it. Not pride. Recognition. I was ambitious, he said, impatient. I thought I knew exactly what my life was going to look like. She complicated that. I turned the ring slowly on my finger. "And the ring?" I asked. He looked at it again. I gave it to her. The words landed quietly. No dramatic shift. Just a small, irreversible fact. "I didn't have much money then," he said. "It wasn't expensive, but I wanted it to mean something." He leaned back slightly. "It did, for me." "For her?" I asked. He hesitated. "I believe so," he said, "at least for a while." I watched his face carefully. He wasn't lying. But he wasn't telling everything either. "What happened?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for the water glass in front of him and took a slow sip. "Life," he said finally. "Opportunities, expectations." That wasn't an answer. It was a summary people use when they don't want to name choices. "You left," I said. His eyes flicked up to mine. "Yes." The word was quiet, not defensive. Did you tell her why I asked? He looked away. I told her what I thought was necessary at the time. That's not what I asked. He held my gaze for a second longer this time. No, he said. I nodded once. That made sense. More sense than I wanted it to. She kept it, I said, lifting my hand slightly, for 30 years. His eyes followed the movement. I didn't expect that. Something in his voice shifted. Not regret exactly. Recognition of a consequence that had lived longer than he had considered. She kept a lot of things I said, most of them small, organized, controlled. I thought of the shoebox. The photograph. The unsent cards. She didn't talk about you, I added. He absorbed that. I didn't think she would, he said. That doesn't mean you didn't matter. He didn't respond. The truth hung between us, incomplete but understood. I have a photograph, I said. His posture changed slightly. From 1994, outside a brick building. You're both in it. His jaw tightened. She's laughing, I said. He closed his eyes again. Longer this time. When she laughed, he said quietly, it wasn't careful. That word again. Careful. I thought about every version of my grandmother I had known. The one who spoke softly. The one who didn't argue. The one who absorbed more than she expressed. And the one in that photograph. Unfiltered. Unprotected. I didn't know she could look like that, I said. That's because you met her, after he replied. After what? He looked at me. After me. The sentence was simple, but it shifted something inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Understanding. A piece of her life had ended, and everything I knew about her had been shaped by what came after. That's a convenient way to frame it, I said. His expression didn't harden. It steadied. You're right, he said, it is. I hadn't expected that. Most people in his position deflected. Reframed. Minimized. He didn't. Why didn't you ever reach out, I asked. He took a breath. Because by the time I realized I should have, he said it would have been for me, not for her. I considered that. It sounded like something people say to excuse silence. But it also sounded like something that might be true. She ended up alone, I said. I know, he said. The words came too quickly. You know, I repeated. He looked at the table again. I kept track, he said, in ways that didn't require contact. That sounds like a comfortable distance. It was. At least he didn't deny it. I leaned back in my chair. The room felt smaller now. More personal. More complicated. She had a funeral, I said, last Friday. He didn't move. Only one person showed up. He looked up. Me. Something in his face broke then. Not visibly. But I felt it. Like a shift in air pressure before a storm. I didn't know, he said. No, I replied, you didn't. Silence again. Different this time. He stood slowly. Walked back to the window. For a moment I thought the conversation was over. That he would return to the meeting. To the version of himself that functioned cleanly in public. But he didn't. Claire, he said without turning, what do you want from me? It wasn't defensive. It wasn't strategic. It was direct. And I realized I didn't have an answer. Not yet. I looked at the ring. At the thin gold band that had carried something across 3 decades without explanation. I don't know, I said. That was the truth. He nodded once. Fair enough? He turned back toward me. The distance between who he had been and who he was now felt visible. Not in a dramatic way. In the way people carry older versions of themselves quietly. We should finish the meeting, he said. Of course. He paused at the door. Would you be willing to show me that photograph, he asked? Not demanded. Asked. I held his gaze. I'll think about it. He accepted that. Then he opened the door. The others re-entered with practiced neutrality. But the room was different now. Not because they knew what had been said, because something had shifted in how I occupied my seat. I didn't move closer to the center. I didn't speak more loudly. I just didn't shrink. The meeting resumed. Numbers returned. Voices regained their rhythm. But every now and then I felt his attention flicker toward my hand. Not intrusive. Not constant. Just aware. When it ended, people gathered their things and made polite comments about timelines and follow-ups. The woman from legal touched my arm briefly. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said. She nodded, but her eyes lingered, as if she knew fine was a placeholder. In the elevator down, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. Same blazer. Same posture. Same woman who had walked in that morning. And not. I lifted my hand slightly. The ring caught the light. For the first time, it didn't feel like something I was borrowing. It felt like something I was carrying. There was a difference. Outside, the city moved as it always did. People crossed streets. Cars waited at lights. Nothing marked what had just happened. That felt appropriate. Some shifts don't announce themselves. They settle quietly. Later that evening, I sat at my kitchen table with the photograph in front of me. The younger version of Daniel Whitmore stood beside my grandmother, looking at her like she was the only person who existed in that frame. I studied his expression. Then I studied hers. And for the first time, I didn't see a mystery. I saw a before. I picked up my phone, scrolled to my mother's name, and stopped. Not yet. Instead, I turned the photograph over, ran my finger along the date again. May 1994. 30 years ago. I looked down at the ring, then back at the photograph, and a quieter question formed. Not about him. Not about the past. About her. What did she choose to keep? And what did she choose to bury? I arrived early again. I told myself it was habit. It wasn't. I wanted a few quiet minutes before the room filled with voices that already knew where they belonged. The security guard recognized me this time. "Back again," he said. I nodded. "Just a follow-up meeting." He smiled politely, then looked past me for the next person. That was the thing about places like this. You could come and go for years and still remain interchangeable. I took the elevator to the 23rd floor. Same hallway. Same muted carpet. Same framed photographs of buildings that looked more important than the people inside them. The conference room was empty. I chose the same seat as last time. Not hidden. Not central. Safe. I placed my notebook in front of me. Set my pen beside it. Then rested my hands on the table. The ring caught the light. I didn't turn it this time. I just let it sit where it was. A few minutes later, the door opened. Not a group. Just him. Daniel Whitmore stepped in without the usual entourage. No assistant. No legal team. No audience. He paused when he saw me already seated. Something like relief passed across his face. Subtle. Quick. "You're early," he said. "So are you." He closed the door behind him. Not fully. Just enough to soften the hallway noise. He took the chair across from me again. Same position as before. But the energy wasn't the same. Last time I had been an interruption. Now I was expected. "Did you bring it?" he asked. Not demanding. Careful. I reached into my bag and pulled out the photograph. I didn't slide it across immediately. I looked at it first. Then at him. "She kept this under her bed," I said. He nodded. "That sounds like her. You say that like you knew her well." He didn't answer right away. "Enough to recognize what she would hide," he said. I placed the photograph on the table between us. Face up. He leaned forward. For a moment he didn't touch it. Just looked. His eyes moved over the younger version of himself. Then to her. And stayed there. "She looks," he started, then stopped. "Different," I offered. He shook his head. "Number." He swallowed. "Exactly the same." I watched his hands. They rested on the table, fingers slightly curled as if holding something invisible. "She used to stand like that when she felt seen," he said quietly. "Relaxed, not guarded." I thought about the version of her I had known. The one who folded dish towels into perfect rectangles. The one who avoided raising her voice even when someone deserved it. "She wasn't like that later," I said. "No," he replied. There was no defense in it. No attempt to rewrite. Just agreement. He finally reached out and touched the corner of the photograph. Not picking it up. Just grounding himself. "We were outside the office building," he said. "I had just gotten a promotion, small one. but it felt big at the time. And she was there. She finished her shift early that day. His mouth lifted slightly. She said we should mark the occasion. I didn't know what that meant. What did it mean? I asked. He exhaled softly. We bought 2 coffees from a street cart and sat on a bench that wasn't very clean. I smiled without meaning to. That sounds like her. He looked at me. You didn't know that version of her. No, I said. We let that settle. 2 different people. Same woman. Separated by something neither of us had fully named yet. What happened after that? I asked. He leaned back in his chair. Not avoiding the question. Just choosing how to answer it. I started getting attention, he said. From people who mattered. From people who could move things for me. And she couldn't. It wasn't an accusation. Just a fact. He nodded. She didn't fit into that world. Or you didn't want her to, I said. His eyes met mine. You're not wrong. The honesty didn't make it better. It made it clearer. I thought I could separate things, he continued. Work in one direction, keep her in another. That never works, I said. No, he agreed, it doesn't. He picked up the photograph now. Carefully. As if it might tear if he held it too tightly. There was a dinner, he said. With senior partners. I was invited last minute. It mattered. And you didn't bring her. I didn't tell her about it. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Recognition. Of a choice. A small one. That grows over time. She found out anyway, he said. How? He gave a short, humorless breath. She was cleaning one of the offices when she overheard someone mention it. My name. The restaurant. He looked at the photograph again. She didn't say anything at first, just asked how my day had been. And you lied. Yes. The word landed heavier this time. Then what I asked. He set the photograph back on the table. She stopped asking questions after that, he said. I thought about the note she left me. You were the one who came. That matters more than you know. She learned something I said. So did I, he replied. What? That I could keep moving forward without explaining myself. That sounds like a lesson that benefits you, I said. It did, he admitted. Silence again. But this one carried weight. You left after that, I said. Not immediately, he said, but the distance was already there. And the ring. He looked at my hand. I gave it to her before all that he said, back when I still believed I could have both. I turned it slightly. Not out of habit. Out of awareness. She kept it, I said. Yes. For 30 years. He didn't respond. Because there wasn't anything to say that wouldn't sound smaller than the fact itself. She never mentioned you, I added. That doesn't mean she forgot. I don't think she did, I said. He nodded. Slowly. As if that possibility had always been there. Just never confirmed. There was a soft knock on the door. It opened slightly. The woman from legal leaned in. We're ready when you are, she said. Daniel glanced at her, then back at me. Give us a few more minutes, he said. She hesitated for half a second. Then nodded and closed the door. She trusted you, he said quietly. I looked at him. I was the one who showed up, I replied. He absorbed that. Not defensively. Just accurately. There are things I didn't do, he said. I know. There are things I should have done differently. I didn't offer him relief. Or judgment. Just space. That doesn't change what happened, I said. No, he agreed, it doesn't. He stood. Walked to the window again. This time I stayed seated. You said she ended up alone, he said. Yes. That wasn't because she didn't matter. I held his words for a moment. Then let them settle. Maybe I said, or maybe it was because the people she mattered to made different choices. He didn't argue. Because he couldn't. Because it was true. In a way that didn't need to be proven. He turned back toward me. What are you going to do with it? He asked. The ring. Yes. I looked at my hand. The thin gold band. The small green stone. The scratch that caught the light differently now that I noticed it. I don't know yet, I said. That's fair. He walked back to the table. Stopped across from me. There are things about that time, about her, that you don't know, he said. I assumed that. I can tell you, he added. There it was. The offer. Not control. Not authority. Information. On his terms. I felt the weight of it. And the shape of the choice in front of me. Why now, I asked. He met my gaze. Because you walked into this room wearing something I thought I had lost. That's about you, I said. Yes, he said, it is. I appreciated the honesty. Even if it didn't make the situation easier. I gathered the photograph and slid it back into my bag. Not rejecting him. Not accepting him. Just not deciding yet. We should go back in, I said. He nodded. We walked out together. Not side by side. Not separate. Something in between. The meeting resumed. Voices picked up where they had left off, but I noticed something new. Not in him. In me? I didn't watch him to understand the room anymore. I watched the room to understand him. Where people deferred. Where they hesitated. Where they aligned themselves. Power had a pattern. And for the first time I could see it. Not from the outside. From the inside. When the meeting ended, he didn't stop me. Didn't ask for an answer. Didn't follow. That more than anything told me this wasn't finished. Outside, the air felt different. Not lighter. Just clearer. I walked past the building's glass doors and paused on the sidewalk. Reflections moved across the surface. People going somewhere. People returning from somewhere. I saw myself in the glass. Then I saw the ring. And behind it, something else. A connection that wasn't about him. Not really. It was about her. And the version of her I was only starting to understand. That night I took the shoebox out again. Spread everything across the table. Receipts. Bulletins. Old papers. I looked at them differently now. Not as clutter. As fragments. Then I saw something I had missed before. A folded document tucked between two pay stubs. I opened it slowly. Read the first line. And felt my breath catch. It wasn't a letter. It was a contract. With a name I now recognized. Daniel Whitmore. The contract wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't addressed to her either. Not directly. It was a services agreement, standard format, typed, clean margins, legal language that pretended to be neutral. But the names were there. Daniel Whitmore. Evelyn Harper. I sat at my kitchen table and read it twice. Then a third time. The refrigerator hummed. The clock above the stove ticked in steady, unbothered intervals. Nothing in the room reacted. Only me. It was dated June 1994. A month after the photograph. The language was careful. Consulting support. Administrative assistance. Confidential work. Compensation structured in a way that looked modest on paper and ambiguous in reality. There was a clause about discretion. There always is. But this one was specific. It referenced personal and professional matters intersecting with executive advancement. I didn't need to be a lawyer to understand what that meant. I closed the document, then opened it again. Somewhere between those lines, something had shifted. Not just in his life. In hers. I leaned back in my chair. Tried to place the version of my grandmother I knew into this framework. It didn't fit. Or maybe it did. Just not in a way I had ever been allowed to see. The next morning I called my mother. She answered on the fourth ring. "Hi, honey," she said, voice already carrying the polite distance she used when she expected inconvenience. "Mom," I said, "I found something at Grandma's house." A pause. "What kind of something?" "A contract." Another pause. "Longer?" "I told you there might be paperwork about accounts," she said quickly. "It's not about accounts." Silence. I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background. "What is it then?" she asked. "It has her name on it, and his." "Who's?" "Daniel Whitmore." The name settled between us. Heavy. Recognizable. Even to someone who pretended not to follow business news. "I don't know anything about that," she said. Too fast. "I didn't ask if you did." "That sounded like you were asking." I let that sit. "I think you knew more about her life than you ever said," I replied. "That's not fair, Claire." "No," I said. "What's not fair is that she died with no one there." My mother inhaled sharply. "That's not on me." "Isn't it?" Her voice hardened. "Your grandmother made her choices. She pushed people away. Or they left, I said. You don't understand what it was like back then. Then explain it. Another pause. This one carried something else. Not avoidance. Memory. She was complicated, my mother said finally. That's not an explanation. It's the only one you're going to get. I looked down at the contract on the table. At least tell me this, I said. Did you know about him? Silence. Then? Yes. The word came out quiet. Careful. Like it had been stored somewhere deep. What did you know, I asked. That he existed, she said. That he mattered to her in a way I didn't like. Why didn't you like it? Because it changed things. How? My mother exhaled slowly. She started expecting things she said, from people, from life. That sounded like a problem in her world. And that was bad, I asked. It made everything harder. For who? For everyone, she replied. I closed my eyes for a moment. Let that settle. You mean it made it harder for you, I said. She didn't respond. Which was its own answer. What happened between them, I asked. I don't know all the details, she said. I didn't want to. That's different from not knowing. I was young, Claire, she said. I had my own life. So did she. That's not the same. Why not? Because she was the mother. The statement landed with a kind of inherited certainty. As if it explained everything. As if it justified something. She wasn't allowed to have her own life, I asked. That's not what I said. It's what it sounds like. My mother's voice tightened. You're looking at this through a lens that didn't exist, then, she said. No, I replied. I'm looking at it through the fact that she ended up alone. Silence again. Then softer. She didn't have to, my mother said. That stopped me. What do you mean? She made choices, Claire, after he left, after everything changed. What kind of choices? Ones that made it easier to be by herself than to risk. That again. I looked at the ring. At the small green stone that had carried something I was only beginning to understand. She kept the ring, I said. I know, my mother replied. You knew. I saw it once, she said, years ago. She thought I didn't notice. What did you think? I thought it was unnecessary. The word sat wrong. Cold. Efficient. You thought her memory of someone she loved was unnecessary? I thought holding on to the past was unhealthy. Or inconvenient, I said. My mother didn't answer. Did you ever ask her about him, I pressed? No. Why not? Because I didn't want to hear the answer. There it was. Not ignorance. Choice. I felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Clarity. Mom, I said, I'm meeting him again today. Another pause. You shouldn't get involved, she said. I already am. This isn't your situation. It became my situation when she left me the ring. That doesn't mean you have to carry it. I looked at my hand. At the way the ring fit now without adjustment. I think she wanted me to, I said. My mother sighed. That's a heavy thing to assume. So is pretending nothing happened. She didn't respond. I'll call you later, I said. Claire. I hung up. Not out of anger. Out of completion. There was nothing else she was going to give me right now. And I needed to move forward. The office felt different that afternoon. Not because it had changed. Because I had. I checked in. Took the elevator. Walked the same hallway. But this time I wasn't looking at the framed photographs. I was thinking about structures. About agreements. About the quiet ways people shape each other's lives without acknowledging it. Daniel was already in the conference room. Alone again. He looked up when I entered. There was no surprise this time. Just recognition. You found something, he said. Not a question. I closed the door behind me. Walked to the table. Placed the contract in front of him. Face down. He looked at it. Didn't touch it. What is it, he asked. You tell me. He hesitated. Then turned it over. His eyes moved quickly at first. Then slower. Then stopped. I watched his face. Not for guilt. For truth. He leaned back in his chair. Exhaled. That was a long time ago, he said. That's not an answer. It's context. It's avoidance. He met my gaze. This was part of my early career, he said. Things were different. Different how? He looked at the contract again. As I said before, he replied, personal and professional lines weren't as clearly defined. I leaned forward. You put that in writing. I needed structure, he said. For what? For something that didn't fit neatly into either category. I considered that. It looks like you formalized her role, I said. I did. And what was that role exactly? He paused. Support, he said. That's vague. It was meant to be. I felt the tension shift. Not louder. Sharper. She helped me think, he continued. Challenge assumptions. See things from angles I wasn't trained to consider. And you paid her for that. Yes. And what did she get beyond that? He didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched. Then, not enough, he said. The words landed quietly, but they didn't soften anything. Why write a contract at all, I asked. To protect both of us, he said. From what? From the world I was entering, he replied. And from yourself, I added. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. That wasn't my intention, he said. But it was the result. He didn't deny it. I sat back. Let the weight of it settle between us. This wasn't just about a relationship. It was about structure, power, choice, and the quiet ways those things intersect. She kept it, I said again, almost to myself. Yes? For 30 years. He looked at the ring, then back at me. I didn't think she would. I nodded. That seems to be a pattern. He absorbed that. Not defensively. Just accurately. What do you want from me, Claire? He asked again. This time I had an answer. Not an explanation, I said. Then what? I looked at him. At the man who had built something substantial. At the version of him who had once sat on a bench with my grandmother and shared coffee. I want you to understand what your choices created, I said. He didn't look away. I do, he replied. No, I said, you're starting to. Silence. Then he nodded. Slowly. That's fair. There was a knock at the door. This time, neither of us acknowledged it right away. The moment held. Not broken. Just marked. Because something had shifted again. And there was no going back to before. I didn't leave the contract on the table. I took it with me. That mattered. Not to him. To me. It was the first time I chose not to let him hold the narrative. Outside the hallway felt narrower. Or maybe I was just more aware of how spaces shape behavior. People moved around me with purpose. Phones in hand. Eyes forward. No one knew what had just been said behind that door. That felt right. Some truths aren't meant for public rooms. They change people more than they change outcomes. I spent the afternoon at my desk reviewing compliance notes I had already read twice. The words blurred. Zoning clauses. Funding timelines. Community obligations. All of it structured. All of it documented. Unlike her. Unlike what she had been to him. There was no formal record of what she gave. Only traces. A contract that said less than it implied. A photograph that showed more than it explained. And a ring that carried the rest. At 5:30, I shut down my computer. Not because I was done. Because I needed space to think. I drove past my apartment. Kept going. The road out of the city opened into familiar stretches of suburbia. Chain restaurants. Gas stations. Church signs announcing midweek services. I turned without signaling onto the street where my grandmother had lived. The house looked smaller than I remembered. It often does when you return with different questions. The porch light was off. The lilac bush had started to brown at the edges. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air felt still. Not empty. Paused. I didn't turn on all the lights, just the one above the kitchen sink. Soft. Contained. I placed the contract on the table beside the shoebox. Then I sat. Not to search. To listen. Sometimes silence carries more information than movement. After a while I stood and walked into her bedroom. The bed was made. Corners tight. Pillows centered. The way she always kept it. I sat on the edge again. The same place as before. But I wasn't looking for hidden things now. I was trying to understand what had already been there. I thought about my mother's words. She started expecting things. The sentence had sounded like criticism. Now it sounded like a shift. A moment when someone decides they deserve more. And what happens when the world doesn't agree? I lay back on the bed, stared at the ceiling. There were faint marks near the corner. Water damage, maybe. Or time. I imagined her here, years ago, holding that ring, not as a symbol of what she lost, but of what she had once been allowed to feel, seen, chosen, important. Then I imagined the moment that ended. Not dramatically. No raised voices. No final confrontation. Just a quiet realization. He was moving forward. Without her. And she had to decide what to do with that. Keep reaching. Or step back. My mother said she chose to step back. That it made things easier. I didn't believe that. I believed it made things quieter. There's a difference. Easier is about effort. Quieter is about visibility. She became someone who didn't ask. Didn't expect. Didn't disrupt. Not because she didn't feel. Because she learned what happened when she did. I sat up. Looked at the dresser. Her hairbrush was still there. A few strands caught in the bristles. I picked it up. Held it in my hand. Such a small, ordinary object. Like the ring. Like the contract. None of them meant much on their own. Together they told a story no one had said out loud. Back in the kitchen, I opened the shoebox again. This time I wasn't scanning. I was reading. Carefully. Line by line. I noticed patterns. Dates that clustered. Church bulletins from certain months. Receipts from the same grocery store. Then a gap. A stretch where there were fewer records. Late 1994. Into 1995. After the contract. After the photograph. After whatever had ended. There were no letters from him. No notes. No explanations. Just absence. And then structure again. Bills. Schedules. Routine. She rebuilt her life around predictability. Around things that didn't change their minds. I closed the box. Sat back. And realized something I hadn't expected. I wasn't angry at him. Not in the way I thought I would be. What I felt was clarity. About what happens when one person's momentum becomes another person's silence. The next morning I called him. Not through his office. Directly. He answered on the second ring. Daniel Whitmore. It's Claire. A brief pause. Then, I was expecting your call. Of course he was. People like him anticipate outcomes. I have a question, I said. I assumed you would. After everything ended, did you ever think about what it did to her? Silence. Not avoidance. Consideration. Yes, he said finally. When? Not at the time. I nodded even though he couldn't see it. Of course not. When then, I asked. A few years later, he said, when I started noticing patterns. What kind of patterns? In how I made decisions, he replied, who I prioritized, what I justified. And I realized I had built something that required me to not look back. I let that sit. That's convenient, I said. It was effective, he corrected. Then softer. Not the same thing. I appreciated that. The distinction mattered. Why didn't you reach out, I asked. We've been through this, he said. No, I replied, we've been around it. He exhaled. Because by the time I understood the cost, he said I had already benefited from it. That was more honest than I expected. And you didn't want to disrupt that, I said. Yes. No hesitation. No defense. Just truth. I stood by my kitchen window. Looked out at the street. A woman walked her dog. A car passed slowly. Ordinary life continuing. Do you think she wanted you to come back? I asked. I think she wanted me to choose differently the first time, he said. That landed. Clean. Accurate. And impossible to undo. I'm not asking you to fix anything I said. I know. I'm not asking for an apology. I understand. I turned the ring on my finger. This time not out of habit. Out of thought. I want you to see her, I said. He didn't respond immediately. Then, I do, he said. Not who she was to you, I added. Who she became after you. Silence. Longer. He was thinking. That was new. Can we meet, he asked. Not in your office. Agreed. Somewhere neutral. Of course. We chose a small cafe halfway between downtown and the suburbs. Not a place he would usually go. That was intentional. When I arrived, he was already there. No suit jacket. Just a white shirt sleeves rolled once. He stood when I approached. A small, almost outdated gesture. Claire. Daniel. We sat. Ordered coffee. Waited until the server walked away. Then we began again. But this time something was different. He wasn't in control of the setting. And I wasn't just reacting. I placed the contract on the table. Next to it, the photograph. And finally, I rested my hand beside them. The ring catching the light. This is everything I have, I said. He looked at the three objects. Then at me. And this, I continued, is everything you didn't finish. He didn't argue. Didn't deflect. He just nodded. Slowly. I see that, he said. And for the first time since this started, I believed him. I didn't rush the next question. I let the coffee cool. I let the room settle into its ordinary rhythm. Cups placed on saucers, a door opening and closing, low voices that didn't belong to us. He watched the table. Not me. The contract, the photograph, the ring. 3 points in a line. 3 versions of the same story. You said you see it, I said. I do. What does that mean exactly? He took a breath. Chose his words. It means I recognize that what I built included what I left behind. I nodded. That's a clean sentence, I said, but it's still abstract. He didn't argue. Then make it concrete, I added. He leaned back slightly. Not retreating. Creating space to think. She gave me perspective, he said. Not just emotional, practical. She saw things I didn't. What kind of things? Where I was overreaching, where I was ignoring people, where I was simplifying problems to move faster. I listened. That sounds like unpaid labor, I said. It became paid, he replied, nodding toward the contract. That doesn't change the dynamic. No, he agreed, it doesn't. I appreciated that he didn't try to reframe it. She helped me make decisions that shaped my early career, he continued. Deals, partnerships, even how I positioned myself internally. And then I started being rewarded for those decisions, he said. Promotions, access, influence. And she didn't fit into that version of you. He held my gaze. No, he said. There it was again. Simple. Uncomfortable. True. I looked at the photograph. At her face. At the way she laughed without holding anything back. She paid for that, I said. Yes. Not defensive. Not minimized. Just acknowledged. With time, I added. With silence, he said. We sat with that. 2 different words. Same outcome. Do you think she would have wanted recognition, I asked? He considered it. No, he said, not publicly. Why not? Because she valued privacy, he replied, and because she understood how those worlds operate. That sounds like another way of saying she adjusted to your limitations. He didn't correct me. That's fair, he said. I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup. It had gone lukewarm. I'm not interested in exposing anything, I said. I didn't think you were. I'm interested in balance. He leaned forward slightly. What does that look like? I thought about that. Not in abstract terms. In real ones. She spent 30 years being invisible, I said. Not because she had nothing to offer. Because the people who benefited from her didn't carry her forward. His eyes didn't leave mine. I can't change that, he said. I know. But I can acknowledge it. That's a start, I replied. Silence again. But not empty. Measured. Intentional. There's a foundation, he said after a moment. We fund community initiatives, housing, education. I didn't react. He noticed. I'm not offering a gesture, he added. I'm offering a structure. That benefits you, I said. It also benefits others. And her. He paused. Then, it wouldn't be in her name, he said, not publicly. That told me he had thought about this before. Not recently. Before. What would it be then, I asked. A program, he said. For women in support roles, administrative, custodial. People who see how things work but are never asked to shape them. I listened carefully. That's closer, I said. But not enough. He didn't flinch. What's missing, he asked. Specificity, I said. Accountability, and the part that doesn't let you stay comfortable. He absorbed that. How do we do that, he asked. I looked at the contract again. At the language that had tried to define something that didn't fit. You don't design it alone, I said. He nodded. Who then? People who've lived it, I replied, not just observed it. That makes sense. And it's not a one-time initiative, I added. It's ongoing, structured, reviewed. He was already thinking in systems. I could see it. That can be arranged, he said. Of course it can, I replied. That's not the question. What is? Whether you stay engaged when it's no longer new. He held that. Didn't answer immediately. I will, he said finally. I believed that he believed it. That was different from certainty. But it was something. This isn't about repayment, I said. I understand. It's about alignment. He nodded. Between what you benefited from and what you support now. That's fair. We let that settle. The cafe had filled slightly. A couple at the next table leaned closer to each other. A barista called out an order. Normal life continued. I looked at the ring again. Then at him. There's one more thing, I said. Go on. You don't get to define her in this process. He didn't hesitate. I wouldn't. Good, I said, because you didn't know her at the end. No, he agreed. And that version matters too. I understand. I believed him. Not because of what he said. Because of what he didn't try to claim. We finished our coffee. Not quickly. Not slowly. Just completely. When we stood there was no formal closing. No handshake that meant anything beyond habit. But there was something else. A shift. Not dramatic. Not visible to anyone else in the room. But present. He picked up his jacket. I'll have my team draft a proposal, he said. I shook my head. Not yet. He stopped. Why not? Because this isn't a document problem, I said. It's a perspective problem. He considered that. Then nodded. Then we start with conversations, he said. Yes. With the right people. Exactly. We walked out of the cafe together. Then paused on the sidewalk. Different directions. Different lives. Connected by something neither of us had planned. Claire, he said. I turned. Thank you. It wasn't for the meeting. Or the proposal. It was for something harder to name. I nodded. Then I left. That evening I returned to my apartment. Placed the contract back in the shoebox. But I didn't close it. Not yet. I sat at the table and looked at everything again. The photograph. The papers. The small objects that had outlasted explanation. And I realized something. I wasn't carrying her story to fix it. I was carrying it to understand it. And then decide what to do with that understanding. I picked up the ring. Turned it once. Then stopped. It didn't need adjusting anymore. That felt right. Because this wasn't about changing the past. It was about choosing what to build from it. And for the first time since that meeting, I knew what that might look like. Not loud. Not public. But real. Something that didn't erase what happened. But didn't let it stay invisible either. I reached for my phone. Scrolled to my mother's name. This time I didn't hesitate. I pressed call. My mother answered on the first ring. That was new. Claire. Her voice carried something I hadn't heard before. Not distance. Not irritation. Attention. I've been thinking, I said. So have I. We didn't rush past that. It mattered that we both said it. I met with him again, I added. A pause. Not avoidance. Bracing. I figured you would, she said. I didn't go to confront him. I didn't think you would. That surprised me. Why not, I asked. Because you're not like me, she replied. I let that sit. Not as a compliment. As information. I don't want to turn this into something loud, I said. I'm glad she said quickly. That's not what I mean. Another pause. I want to understand what she carried, I continued, and what she chose to do with it. My mother exhaled slowly. You're asking questions I avoided for a long time, she said. I know. Silence. Then, I was angry at her, she said. The admission came out flat. Not dramatic. Just true. For what I asked. For changing, she replied. For expecting more than what we had. That sounds like she was growing. It felt like she was leaving, my mother said. That reframed everything. You were afraid, I said. Yes. No hesitation. She had always been stable, my mother continued. Predictable. And then suddenly she wasn't satisfied anymore. And that threatened you. It disrupted everything she said. The way our family worked, the roles, the expectations. I leaned against the counter, looked at my reflection in the darkened window. And when he left, I asked. She changed again, my mother said. How? She got quieter, not sad, just contained. That matched what I knew. What did you do? I asked. I pulled back, she said. Why? Because I didn't know how to meet her where she was, she replied, and it was easier to return to what I understood. Routine. Distance. Structure. You chose comfort, I said. Yes. The honesty didn't make it easier, but it made it clearer. I think she did too, my mother added. In a different way. I thought about that. She stopped asking, I said. Yes. She stopped expecting. Yes. And everyone adjusted to that version of her. Yes. The pattern revealed itself, not as a single event, but as a series of small decisions, each one reasonable on its own, together defining a life. I'm not blaming you, I said. I know. I'm trying to see it accurately. That's more than I did, she replied. We stayed on the line, not filling the space, letting it exist. I'm working with him on something, I said. Another pause. What kind of something? A program, I said, for women like her, people who support systems without being seen inside them. My mother didn't respond immediately. Then, that sounds like her, she said. It was the first time she had spoken about my grandmother without distance, without qualification, just recognition. It's not going to have her name on it, I added. I understand. But it will carry what she gave. That matters more, my mother said quietly. We let that settle. I wish I had asked her more questions, she said after a moment. So do I. I thought there would be time. There usually is, I said. Until there isn't. Yes. The simplicity of it held weight. Not dramatic? Just real. I'm coming by the house tomorrow, my mother said. To help sort things. I smiled slightly. Okay. Not because I needed help. Because she was choosing to show up. That mattered. I'll see you then, she said. See you. We hung up. I stood there for a moment longer. Then I turned off the kitchen light. The next morning the house felt different again. Not because anything had changed. Because someone else was coming into it with a different intention. My mother arrived 10 minutes early. Another new thing. She stood on the porch for a second before knocking, as if remembering how to enter. I opened the door. Hi, she said. Hi. We didn't hug, but we didn't stay distant either. Something in between. We moved through the house slowly, not rushing to sort, not avoiding anything either. In the kitchen, she picked up one of the mugs, turned it in her hands. She used this one every morning, she said. How do you know? I asked. I used to stay here sometimes, she replied, when things were easier. I nodded. In the bedroom, she paused at the dresser, ran her fingers lightly over the surface. She kept everything in order, she said. Yes, even when things weren't. That was new. A layer I hadn't heard before. We sat on the bed. The same place I had sat alone. Now shared. I saw that ring once, she said. You told me. I didn't tell you what I thought. What did you think? She looked at my hand, at the way it fit now. I thought it meant she had lived a life I didn't understand, she said. And that made you uncomfortable? Yes. Why? Because it meant she was more than just my mother, she said. I considered that. That's not easy to see, I said. No, she agreed, it isn't. We sat in silence, not empty, Full. I reached into my bag and pulled out the photograph. Placed it between us. She looked at it. Longer than before. She looks happy, she said. She does. I don't remember her like that. I didn't either. My mother traced the edge of the photo with her finger. Maybe we didn't give her enough room to be that person, she said. I didn't correct her. Because she was already doing the work. Back in the kitchen, we opened the shoebox together. Went through each item. Not as clutter. As context. At one point, my mother picked up the contract. Read it carefully. More slowly than I had. She helped him, she said. Yes. In ways that weren't recognized. Yes. And then she adjusted when that ended. Yes. My mother set the contract down. Looked at me. What are you going to do with all this? She asked. I thought about that. Not in abstract terms. In real ones. I'm going to carry it forward, I said. How? In something that reflects what she gave, I replied, without reducing her to it. My mother nodded. That sounds right. We finished sorting in the late afternoon. Boxes labeled. Items set aside. Not everything resolved. But enough. As she prepared to leave, she paused at the door. Turned back. I'm glad you were there, she said. At the end. So am I replied. She nodded. Then she left. I stood in the doorway for a moment. Watched her car pull away. Then I closed the door. The house felt quieter again. But not the same kind of quiet as before. This one held something else. Completion. That evening I met Daniel one last time. Not in a conference room. Not in a cafe. In a small community center where the first conversations for the program would begin. He stood near the entrance. No announcement. No introduction. Just present. People moved around us. Women who worked in offices. In schools. In buildings no one noticed until something went wrong. We spoke with them. Listened. Not as representatives. As participants. At one point I stepped back. Watched him. Watched how he listened. Not perfectly. But differently. That was enough. Later, as the room began to empty, he approached me. This is just the beginning, he said. Yes. Thank you for not letting it stay where it was. I looked at the ring. Then at him. Thank her, I said. He nodded. I do. We didn't say goodbye in a formal way. We didn't need to. Some endings don't require closure. They require continuation. That night I sat at my table. The shoebox open. The photograph beside it. The contract folded neatly. And the ring on my hand. Not as a question. Not as a burden. As a connection. I looked at the photograph one last time. Then turned it over. Set it down. And let the room go quiet. If there's something this story leaves you with, it's this. Pay attention to the people who show up quietly in your life. The ones who support you without being seen. The ones whose contributions don't fit into clean categories. Don't wait until it's too late to recognize them. Or to ask who they really are. Because dignity isn't something we give at the end. It's something we acknowledge along the way. And sometimes the smallest objects carry the largest truths.